Hi, I'm Congressman Seth Moulton, and thank you all for being here today. First and foremost, I want to thank the team at Giffords for partnering with my team at Serve America for this event. At a time when our politics are as fractured and polarized as ever before in our history, this issue, common sense gun reform, has remained a unifying force in our politics. Americans from all walks of life and from both parties more or less agree on the basic parameters of this debate. But what we lack in Congress is the political courage to do what we know is necessary to change laws and save lives. And that is why I think this partnership between Giffords and Serve America makes so much sense. When I go out and talk to aspiring candidates, one of the things I'm looking for is a selfless commitment to serving the public's best interest, and a demonstrable sense of courage to take tough stances when it's not expedient because it's the right thing, but not expedient, but because it's the right thing to do. And each of the three candidates that we're about to meet is exactly the type of person who I can count on as my future colleagues to join me in the tough fights that we have ahead. Now, I have the pleasure of welcoming my co-moderator for this conversation, Peter AMBLER. Peter is the executive director and co-founder of the Giffords organization and a lifelong champion of gun safety initiatives in this country. So, Peter, take it away.
Thanks so much, Congressman. Pleasure to be with you and with these esteemed challengers. And of course, with my own personal hero, Gabby Giffords. Just a little bit about me. Like you said, I'm the Giffords co-founder and executive director. We're an organization of 2 million supporters from all 50 states, offices across the country with a long record of bringing Americans together to pass common sense gun safety reform. Now nearly 400 pieces of legislation passed at the state level over the past nearly 8 years in 45 different states. And of course, we are gearing up, hopefully, electing wonderful candidates to the House, to the Senate, and of course to the White House here in 2020 that will give us a unique opportunity in history to pass universal background checks and other life-saving, common sense gun safety policies into law. This partnership is especially important to us. Seth, your team at Serve America is amazing. We've loved working with them. The movement you built of service leaders across the country is just incredible. Obviously we're here with Gabby. She runs our organization. She's the leader in the movement for safer gun laws across the country. She was also, while in Congress, the proudest Navy spouse out there. And of course, Mark's the spouse and to Mark Kelly, who's obviously running for Senate in Arizona, and who spent 25 years in the Navy and served in combat. So that's a very important part of Gabby's service in Congress, to her commitment to this country, which also included long stints on the House Armed Services Committee. So I am going to sort of pause there, and I'm really excited to hear from these wonderful candidates, from Gina, from Jackie, from Sri today, but they'll get a chance to introduce themselves. We're going to turn it over to Gabby here in a second, but before we do, we have a little video to sum up the courage that she brings this fight each and every day.
What is courage? What does it look like? Courage shows truth to power and stands its ground. It's walking out. It's sitting down. It's marching towards something greater. Courage is telling your story even when it's hard to speak. Courage looks like this.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Congresswoman Gabrielle Giffords from Southern Arizona.
You can either complain about something or you can try to fix it.
I will always extend my hand across the aisle to do what's right for the American people, to build consensus, and to get the job done.
Earlier today, a number of people were shot in Tucson, Arizona. Arizona Congresswoman Gabrielle Giffords, wounded in an assassination attempt just about 2 weeks ago, is about to take the next big step along what's expected to be a long road to recovery.
It takes courage to keep going, especially when it feels impossible.
To witness the return of our colleague, who is the personification of courage, Congresswoman Gabby Giffords.
And to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all.
It's standing up and finding your voice again. Courage is speaking out. Courage is saying, we can do better. And knowing no problem is too big to fix.
Wow, Gabby, heart thumping over here. You recently made your third straight appearance at the Democratic National Convention, and what I think we saw on display were just powerful reminders of your recovery. You gave the longest speech you've given since being shot, now almost 10 years ago. And I think all the sort of thousands of people tuned in here today are just eager to hear from you. So let me give you the virtual stage.
I've known the darkest of days, days of pain and uncertain recovery. But confronted by despair, I've summoned hope. Confronted by paralysis and aphasia, I responded with grit and determination. I put one foot in front of the other. I found one word and then I found another. My recovery is a daily fight, but fight makes me stronger. Words once came easily. Today I struggle to speak, but I've not lost my voice. America needs all of us to speak out, even when you have to fight to find the words. I'm also in a second fight, the fight to stop gun violence. It's also a fight forged by tragedy and pain, a fight that can change lives. We are at a crossroads. We can let the shooting continue, or we can act. We can protect our families, our future. We can vote. We can be on the right side of history. Please join us in this fight. Vote, vote, vote. Thank you very much.
Gabby, it's amazing. I mean, you are such a true example of courage and inspiration with your work every single day. I mean, you are a modern day American hero, and we are so grateful. But we also know that there's still a lot more work to do. We still have a lot of laws to change and progress to make, and so I want to introduce some of the people who I know can help us get there. Some amazing congressional candidates, and we'll turn first to United States Air Force veteran down in Texas, Gina Ortiz Jones.
Great. Oh, good. I'm unmuted. Okay. Well, thank you so much, Seth and Gabby, for bringing this together on this very important discussion. And thank you all for joining us. I'm running in Texas's 23rd congressional district. It's the district that runs from San Antonio, 500 miles west, to El Paso, 800 miles of border in the district larger than 30 states. I actually ran in 2018, came up just short, 926 votes. But I know my community, our country is worth fighting for. So got back in. We've already scared the incumbent out. It's an open seat in a district that Hillary won and described as our best pickup opportunity in the entire country. My story really starts over 40 years ago, though, when my mom came to this country. She graduated from the #1 university in the Philippines, but wanted a chance at the American dream. Like so many, she knew from a very young age that if she wanted to live a chance at her best possible life, she'd probably have to leave her home country. And so she raised my sister and I by herself, and she also raised us to never forget that we were very lucky, not smart, lucky to be born in this very special country, and we'd have to give back to a country that gave us so much. It's why I served. It's why my sister serves in the Navy to this day. I was honored to serve in the Air Force as an intelligence officer, deployed to Iraq, served under Don't Ask, Don't Tell, advised on operations all over Africa, Latin America, and then wrapped up my federal career working in the Executive Office of the President on economic and national security issues. And in 2016, I really had to take stock and say, my time in public service might need to be different. I've served in countries where women and minorities are targeted, served in countries where government's disregard for conflict of interest has hollowed out those countries. And I've seen what happens when good people don't stand up. So through my hat in the ring came up just short, but we are again excited about the momentum that we've got. Early voting in Texas starts in just under 6 weeks. And as you hear time and time again, we are ground zero for taking our country back. So thanks so much. And I really look forward to answering your good questions on this very important topic.
Gina, thank you. You are such a fighter. Okay, next we have U.S. Army veteran and Air Force mom, Jackie Gordon from Long Island, New York.
Thank you, Congresswoman and Congressman, and thank you, Gabby, for having me. I am Jackie Gordon. I'm running in the New York 2nd Congressional District here on Long Island. It's Peter King's open seat. So we have a really clear path to victory as the demographics in this district is changing. I am a combat veteran. I had 4 deployments as a reservist to Germany for Desert Storm, Guantanamo Bay, Iraq, and Afghanistan. I'm also a retired school counselor, a public servant, and a single mom and an immigrant. I'm running for Congress because of a little commercial that I saw when I was 20 years old. It said, we do more before 9 a.m. than most people do all day. And I saw that commercial, I was sold. I wanted to be just like the folks in that commercial, working hard and doing more. And so I joined the Army because I wanted to do more for this country that gave me so much and so many opportunities. And I knew that Washington just isn't working for us. Our representatives need to represent the folks that send to stand for them, that send them to elect them. And so I have shared experiences with the folks in this district. I am uniquely poised to address a lot of the issues that we're going to talk to today. As a military veteran, I trained on these assault weapons. As a guidance counselor, I see the damage. I see the damage that these weapons can do to communities and families. And so I know that it's a long time that we come up with a comprehensive plan to really solve this problem of gun violence in this country. And I can't wait till I get to Congress and I can work with my colleagues here to come up with a solution to this problem. Thank you so much.
Jackie, thank you. Now, one of the first things I learned during my service in the Iraq War was the importance of the State Department. And so next we have a Foreign Service veteran, Sri Kulkarni, also from Texas. Sri, over to you.
Thank you very much, Congressman Moulton. And to Gabby, I just got to say, I was so choked up watching that video myself. I hope that some of the people out there who are watching it who are so emotional as well, they get inspired to run themselves or to get more involved, because that's what we need right now. I can tell you that I was not involved in politics at all a few years ago. I grew up in Texas, the son of an immigrant on my dad's side, and a family descended from Sam Houston on my mom's side. We started out in a 2-bedroom apartment with 9 people in it. I had to take care of my dad when he was dying of cancer, and when he passed away and I was 19, I had to help raise my younger siblings, work my way through University of Texas at Austin. I spent a year in the U.S. Senate doing Veterans Affairs, Foreign Policy, and Defense. Most of my career was overseas as a Foreign Service officer in places like Iraq and Israel and Russia. And I specifically wanted to go to places where we could do things about reducing conflict around the world, because I think that makes us all safer. But the reason I'm here right now is because the things that I've seen in our country over the last few years, the hostility, the fear, the division, especially exemplified by the Charlottesville Nazi rally back in 2017. I was asked overseas, are there good people on both sides of this issue? Is this controversial in the United States? And I said, no, they're not. That's when I decided that this polarization that is ripping our society apart had gotten too far. A woman was killed, and a woman from my rival high school was put into the hospital. And so I decided to resign and come home, because when your country's values are being threatened, the most patriotic thing to do is to fight for them. And there are two things above all right now that we have to fight for in 2021. We have to believe in science and evidence. And that applies to the coronavirus, but it also applies to the epidemic of gun violence, which we've been dealing with for years and years. And the other thing is that everyone has to have a voice in our government. Every community has to have a seat at the table, because different communities are differently impacted. And I'm very proud to say that our campaign is the first one of its kind. We're running in 27 different languages in our district, the most diverse district, the largest district by population in the country. And that's why we were able to push our incumbent Pete Olson into dropping out of the race after we got so close in 2018. Now it's an open seat, and we were ranked by National Journal as the #3 seat most likely to flip red to blue. And it's because of that work of pulling all of these communities together. Thank you.
Well, I think after hearing those amazing life stories, you'll agree that these are not just great candidates, they're great leaders. They're going to make a difference, not just by winning important seats for the United States Congress, but by being change agents when they get to Washington. And now we have two pre-recorded messages from two Serve America candidates last time around who are change agents in Washington, Representatives Andy Kim and Mikey Sherrill.
Hi, everyone. This is Congressman Andy Kim, and I wanted to thank you all for joining us today. I wanted to thank Gabby and Seth for your incredible leadership. Gabby, your speech at the DNC was incredible and just reminded us what true service is about and just love for this country. So thank you so much for sharing that with us. All of us are here today because we want to be able to help our community and find a way to be able to do that and recognize that it requires a wide coalition for us to be able to achieve that. And that's something that both Gabby and Seth recognize, whether it's about keeping our community safe from gun violence, or whether that it's about bringing a new generation of leadership of service-oriented people into elected office, into Congress, and be able to work together. This is all part of that same fabric of this country and a vision for our future of what it is that we can actually do to get things done. Here in my district, that's what this is all about. I'm raising my two baby boys just a few miles from where I grew up, and this is about our home, it's about our community, and it's about this country that has given my family every opportunity in life, and that is why I'm serving in Congress, why I served before as a career civilian national security official, and why I'm so grateful to have the chance to be able to fight alongside Gabby and Seth and so many other incredible public servants to be able to keep doing this. So I just wish you all the best and look forward to continue to fight alongside you each and every way. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. This is Congresswoman Mikey Sherrill, and it's really great to be here tonight with two groups that supported me early on and I think know what it takes to get good bipartisan legislation passed. Seth Moulton and Serve America supported myself and a lot of veterans early on because they wanted to see a new generation of leaders, making sure that we're not putting petty partisan politics ahead of the real needs of the American people. Giffords is the same, and we're so instrumental in getting the bipartisan background check legislation passed through the House. And Gabby Giffords herself has been such a role model for me as a dedicated public servant to this country. So I'm really happy to be here tonight. Besides the universal background checks bill in the House, we've also passed the VAWA reauthorization, closed the Charleston loophole, so many other things to really continue to fight hard for common sense gun safety legislation. So I'm happy to be here tonight. Thank you so much for all the hard work and dedication of everybody supporting the efforts of getting good common sense gun safety legislation passed.
Wow, it is so phenomenal to hear from Andy and Mikey, such extraordinary leaders in Congress. They, and of course, Gina, Jackie, and Sri just give me so much hope. This is like a tough time for us as a country with the global pandemic that we face, with the epidemic of gun violence that is unrelenting, and with various other sources of strife and hatred and division. But I want to bring our future members of Congress back into the conversation, because fundamentally we're here to hear from them. And I sort of want to keep going on this theme of service and defense of our country abroad, and your future service to protect our communities and kids from gun violence here at home. And I'm going to ask you all the same question, which is, how does your background serving this country abroad and in the military inform your approach to gun safety matters here in America? And Gina, why don't we start with you?
Sure. Well, like many folks on this call, we went through an extensive background check just to be able to serve. And I served as an intelligence officer. So you go even through a more rigorous background check, right? And then, carried the M9 every single day I was in Iraq, trained in the M4, which is an assault rifle. And so, know firsthand how dangerous these weapons can be in the wrong hands. And so my background, having gone through extensive background checks and that weapons training, shows me that we have to have those same common sense approaches, and for which the vast majority of Americans also support, because again, that makes for as safe communities as possible. As important, though, as my national security background and experience with weapons in that way, are also just the lived experiences of the communities, many communities that I'm looking to represent in this district. The unfortunate shooting in El Paso, that happened just a couple of miles outside of this district. And that was a white nationalist rhetoric inspired domestic terrorist attack that was made all the more deadly based on lax access to weapons, right? The largest massacre of Latinos in American history. It didn't happen in 1819 or 1919, it happened in 2019. So that informs my commitment to common sense gun safety as much as anything else. Also informed by the fact that, San Antonio, Bexar County, where I live here in Texas, has one of the highest rates of domestic violence in the entire state. And we know domestic violence, plus a gun in the home, means that a woman is 5 times more likely to be shot and killed. And so, again, understanding the needs of my community, where we ultimately need to go, this is a leadership issue, as we've talked about so much on this call already. And the most recent experience with during this pandemic, I've done a virtual town hall every single week. One of the ones that we did was with the head of the Domestic Violence Center here in San Antonio. And, we talked about how some of the resources that should have been available to them had the Violence Against Women Act passed the Senate were not available to them because, again, it was held up in the Senate. But that means then that just because there weren't senators with enough courage, right, to say that to close the boyfriend loophole, that meant during a pandemic when we saw escalated rates of domestic violence, that meant the folks on the ground here and in San Antonio and throughout our country dealing with the rise in domestic violence didn't have every single resource they could have had at their hands to address that. And so, we are living through what it looks like when people don't have enough courage to keep deadly weapons out of the hands of folks that shouldn't have them. And that's why I'm so committed to making sure that, folks can go to church, go shopping, just walk down the street and not live in fear of senseless gun violence.
Courage and leadership. I'm so glad you plugged those two themes. And of course, they're two themes that you associate with the United States military. And the three of you are up against candidates from a party that seem to be these days associated with the lowest common denominator. And we need to do better. But let me turn it over to you, Jackie, and then Sri. You can follow answering this sort of fundamental question about what shapes your service.
So when I was in the military, I served as a military police officer. So I trained on assault weapons, and I know exactly how dangerous they are. Just like Gina said, as an educator, I understand the harm that they can bring to communities. I'll just share a quick story with you. When my son was in middle school, one of his classmates was killed by a stray bullet. She was attending a birthday party and a stray bullet took her life. She had a younger sister who was 5. Fast forward a decade later, in walks into my caseload. In my high school, where I was a guidance counselor, this 5-year-old who was now a 16-year-old, who was devastated every time the anniversary of her little sister came around, whose mother was still suffering from the loss of a child so many years later. So these instances are not, they're not frozen in time. They affect families and communities forever. And so we have to get a handle on gun violence in this country. New York is leading the way, but we need to make sure that we spread that throughout the nation. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Sri.
So unfortunately, I did grow up in a neighborhood with a lot of gun violence. So the kind of experiences I had even before my career, such as when I was outside of a Taco Bell with my brother and my father, my mother was sitting in the car with my little brother and sister right next to her, and people opened fire right in front of us. All of us had to hit the ground. My heart was beating out of my chest, and I didn't know if my mother was going to make it out alive or dead. I've had to come home and see yellow tape around my neighbor's house across the street because they were both murdered in their homes in broad daylight. So when I went overseas to places like Iraq and I saw these weapons of war being used, it brought back memories of my childhood. And when I came back home again, to see that this epidemic of gun violence is still continuing even decades later. In 2018, after the horrific Parkland massacre, we had one of our own right here in Santa Fe, just outside of my district, and I went to the funeral of a young woman who was murdered in her own high school. This is what families are dealing with every single day, and what we are talking about is not the Second Amendment, not about taking away people's fundamental rights. What we are talking about is safe public spaces for our families, for our children. The kind of common sense reforms that we want to implement are things like universal background checks, or things like red flag laws, or things like locker laws, which would have possibly prevented that Santa Fe massacre. The truth is that good people on both sides of the aisle can come together if we make sure that we put our families and the safety of our children first.
Great, thank you so much. Such inspiring messages from 3 inspiring Americans. Gabby, I want to turn it to you. First of all, we just saw you on the biggest stage at the Democratic convention where you dropped the mic and owned the stage. But, these are tough times for people. How are you filling your days? What are you up to right now?
I'm so busy. A lot of Zoom calls. Work. Yoga twice a week. French horn. Spanish lesson. Riding my bike. Walking on my treadmill. Watching movies. It's Groundhog Day.
Groundhog Day all over again. I think we can all feel like that. But on a more serious note, Gabby, service and sacrifice are core to your experience, to your identity, to your approach to everything. I was brought into this movement by your sacrifice. Worked for you when you were shot, lost. Our colleague Gabe Zimmerman. 6 people were murdered that day, nearly 10 years ago. But what have you learned from your experiences over the last 9 years?
To be grateful for our friends and family, and to live every day to the fullest. I think that is another powerful message, and I think certainly we're here with 4 other people who live every day to the fullest and spend a lot of time on Zoom as well. Maybe you're spending a little bit less time on your French horn lessons than Gabby is right now, but certainly living every day to the fullest. And I want to get into the next round of questions. And what I want to tackle here is the intersection between hate and guns. We have a gun violence crisis in this country that takes many forms. One of the most tragic and pernicious and destructive elements of it
is when people turn their hate into violence by utilizing a firearm to destructive results. We've seen Charleston, we've seen the Tree of Life, we've seen the Pulse nightclub, and of course we've seen the El Paso shooting a little bit more recently. And it's a native El Pasoan. That was yet another shooting that struck very, very close to home. So in this time of division and hatred, of armed vigilantism and other threats to our democratic institutions and society, I'm interested in y'all's take on this nexus between liberal access to guns and hatred and division. And we can go now in the opposite order, starting with Sri.
Sure. So the first thing is that we have to recognize when there's an attack on Latinos in El Paso, it doesn't just affect the Latino community, it affects all of us. When there's an attack on the Jewish community in Pittsburgh, when there's an attack on the African-American community in Charleston, this affects our entire society. And from my experience working in places like Iraq, where we had to bring together people across communities that were caught in these cycles of violence, we have to bring people to the table and have them understand what's at stake for their entire society. We have to build bridges, even across the most tense situations. And that includes bridges between our police as well as the communities that police them. And that's a lot of what we've seen this year as well, because when our police officers walk out of their police station and walk their beat, they should not feel like they're walking into a war zone. But conversely, our communities need to know and trust the police who are serving them. And so they're common sense things that we can do to try and reduce some of this tension in our society so that we don't have to go through this cycle again and again like we've seen this year. So things like training in de-escalation rather than pulling out your weapon, having body cams, increased transparency so that those officers who actually pull out their weapon again and again, they can't just be passed from one department to another, but we actually have consequences for people so that the people who are actually out there to serve, who listen to the community, who know the community, they are able to make the community feel safer and the police officers feel safer as well. And that's part of what we did overseas, is that we start with the proposition that we have to have solutions focused not on ideology. They have to be focused on evidence, and they have to be focused on bringing people together, because that's what makes all of us safer. If we could do it overseas, if I could sit across the table from people who literally wanted to kill me in Iraq, and work on building coalitions, and I can sit across the table from a Republican and work on common sense gun reforms that will help our entire society.
Thank you. Resonates. Jackie?
And I'm going to just continue with what Sri said. Last night, I attended a VFW meeting with World War II veterans and Vietnam veterans. And I remember when I was deployed, and I would look to my left and my right, and I never thought, are you a Republican? Are you a Democrat? I didn't think that. I saw my comrades, and I knew two things. One, they were going to have my back, and two, we were going to accomplish the mission. Because just like Sri, I worked with the Afghans. And so if they didn't have my back, I would be in trouble. And yesterday at this VFW meeting, I asked those veterans, my brothers and sisters in arms, when you were on the battlefield, did you ever turn to your left and your right and ask if anyone was a Republican or a Democrat? And they all looked at me and they said no. And they also knew two things. They had each other's backs, and they were going to accomplish the mission. And if we could just adopt that same mission focus, maybe we could get something done for the American people.
Thank you. Gina?
Sure. As we are unfortunately living through this pandemic and this economic crisis that have unfortunately, fallen disproportionately and affected disproportionately the most vulnerable community, that also applies to the victims of gun violence. We were talking earlier about domestic violence and access to weapons and what that means disproportionately for women. And also in states like Texas. I mean, Texas is home to not only the unfortunate shooting in El Paso, but 3 of the other top 10 largest mass shootings in modern American history: Austin, Sutherland Springs, and Killeen. And so we have to, again, it's incumbent on us that have the experiences with these weapons, why it's so important that we take common sense steps to protect our communities. And that nexus, as you described, between hate and access to weapons, that can be broken with new leaders, right? Leaders with the courage to take weapons out of the hands of domestic abusers, and make sure that we are investing in things that everyone knows that we have to, like, we've got to study this problem. We have to make sure that we truly understand the effects of what is happening right now, and certainly now, but also over the long term if we don't address this. And then how do we as a society invest in the other things like mental health resources and whatnot to ensure that our communities are truly as safe as possible. So, this isn't a resource issue. This is we keep coming back to it. It's a leadership issue. It's a courage issue. And we've got to elect new leaders that are going to stand up for our communities.
Well, I think what all 3 of you have powerfully outlined is the fact that, there is no other side. Americans are united in opposition to gun violence. Everybody wants our kids to be safe. Nobody wants our communities to have to continue to grapple with these threats that we've faced day in and day out, whether it's everyday gun violence or domestic violence or suicide, or these tragic instances of hate and gun violence that keep on coming up and producing as awful body counts and headlines. I now want to introduce another pair of videos from 2 other of Congressman Moulton's current colleagues, who both Giffords and Serve America have worked to elect in the past. 2 of my favorites, of course, everybody's my favorite. Congressman Jason Crow and Congressman Max Rose from Colorado and Staten Island, respectively.
Hi, it's Congressman Jason Crow from Colorado. Our country is experiencing incredible divisions and declining trust, not just in our institutions, but in our public officials as well. And that's why it's so important that we have people in elected office and in positions around the country that have a demonstrated ability to serve their country and their communities outside of politics. People that have served in uniform for Peace Corps, Teach for America, people that have stepped up to work together across party lines, that have built broad and diverse coalitions to actually get things done for America and for their communities. That's why I'm so proud to be supporting this group, and why I thank Seth Moulton and Gabby Giffords for working hard over the years to elect service-minded candidates and gun violence champions across the country. Because together, by getting a new generation of leadership, servant leaders, people that are in it for the right reasons to make our country and their community a better place, that's how we're going to move together, how we're going to bridge these divisions, and how we're going to get things done as one people. So thank you. I hope you are all well and being safe and staying healthy.
Hey everybody, Max Rose here. When I served in Afghanistan, I saw people put everything on the line for their country and for their fellow Americans. So I have zero patience when I see politicians run and hide whenever we try to end this gun violence epidemic. Weapons of war do not belong on our streets, plain and simple. They don't belong in malls or movie theaters. They have no place in our houses of worship or our schools. When lives are on the line, there is absolutely no time for politics or party lines or special interests. And our service members know exactly that. Because of Gabby Giffords and Seth Moulton, though, we are electing leaders determined to get the job done. 10 years ago, no one would have thought we would be this close to victory. Thanks to you two and so many other groups, we absolutely are. Let's get out there and let's go win.
Peter, I love those guys too, and they're awesome colleagues to have in Congress. Gabby, turning to you, we've seen a lot of members share their words of wisdom and inspiration. I know as a former member of Congress and national figure, you've inspired countless others. Who has inspired you and motivated you to be who you are today?
John Lewis, the civil rights leader. I miss you a lot.
Gabby, you know, I have to agree with you. During his eulogy just over a month ago, President Obama said, and I quote, "America was built by John Lewis's." I think that note on John Lewis is just, that's exactly where we want to be and where we have to be. He's a man who embodied everything that we all strive to be as public servants, serving this country. Selfless dedication to our Constitution, to our values, to others. That's public service at its heart, and John Lewis practiced it his entire life. And I think that, you know, every member of Congress, indeed every American, ought to aspire to have that level of commitment to our communities and to our country. And the group of people we've heard from today, both our panelists and our video guests, they are the types of people who I believe we'll look back on someday and say, they were great public servants. They were great Americans. They made a difference in people's lives. We have a lot of work to do in this country, especially now. But I'm encouraged. I'm hopeful. And I'm inspired. So let's get to work. Now, before we go here, I do want to toss this back to our panelists for your own closing reflections. So, Jackie, maybe we'll begin with you.
Thanks, Seth, and thank you so much for having me here. This is such an important topic that we really can't stop talking about until gun violence, deaths, end. I just want to reiterate that as a military police officer, I do understand how dangerous and the damage that assault weapons can do when they land in the wrong hands. As an educator, I know the harm they can do to communities and families. They don't belong on the streets of our neighborhoods or the hallways of our schools. And so many deaths that happen in this country could have been avoided with common sense gun laws. I look forward to working with my colleagues here on the panel and the ones in Congress, like Congressman, why do I keep saying Congresswoman? Congressman Moulton and Rose and my other colleagues to help to prevent any more unnecessary deaths of any Americans. Thank you.
Jackie, thank you. And we know you've been working hard for your community for a long time. And we're so excited to have you representing them in Washington. Okay, next let's go to Sri. Over to you.
No, thank you, Congressman Moulton. Look, we know that this is the most important election of our lifetimes. We are grappling with a pandemic of epic proportions that has killed 180,000 people. We have racial strife across this country, wounds that we still have not dealt with after generations. And we have an epidemic of gun violence that continues until this day. But the way that we respond to these conflicts is not with greater anger or greater partisanship. The way we respond is with greater patriotism. And patriotism means service to our community and to our country. In my family, our service goes back to the American Revolution. What public service means to me is putting our country first, putting our community first. It means relying on evidence in our policy, in our solutions. And that applies to everything. That applies to evidence in the coronavirus, protecting our healthcare. It applies to common sense gun safety measures. That's why I'm so proud that we finally got, after 20 years, funding for studying how to reduce gun violence, just studying how to reduce gun violence. Because that's what we need to base our solutions on, a common shared reality. Our country was not founded by people who agreed on everything. Our country was founded by people who disagreed very strongly on many things, but they agreed on one thing, that we are stronger as a nation together than we were separate. And I care about your interest, and you care about mine, because that's what makes us a nation. And you're not defined by the challenges that we avoid. You're defined by how we rise to the challenge. And that is the truest measure of patriotism. And that is what's going to carry our country forward through this crisis together.
Patriotism indeed. And this is not a time for summer soldiers or sunshine patriots. We all need to step up, find the courage to make a difference. Thank you. Okay, Gina, bring us home.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Seth, Gabby. This has really been an honor, and thanks, Peter. And always nice to see, hopefully, my future colleagues, Sri and Jackie. And to those of you that are watching, thank you so much for taking time to listen to this important conversation. Now, the next step is making sure that we can enact these, right? And that means we've got to win. We have got to win, and that starts with making sure we get the vote out. 926 votes. That was the margin when I ran in 2018. So I know just how important every phone call, every text, in parts of Texas, it's still too dangerous to campaign in person. So, you can help us from wherever you are. Again, this gun violence issue, gun safety issues are not, they're not local issues. And we look forward to fighting for the things that are going to keep our community safe, but we've got to win, right? So if you are, like me, are tired of these folks that will give you nothing but thoughts and prayers as they cash those checks from the gun lobby, well, then help us win. Phone bank, text bank, and let's make sure we are victorious, and let's make sure we get our country back on the right track. Thanks so much.
All right. I'll say it. Y'all got me fired up. I am ready to go. We've spent, about 50 minutes here hearing from these 5 inspiring leaders, 3 of whom are putting everything that they can. And I know I'm worked for Gabby for a long time. I've worked for many elected officials. I'm married to one. I know how hard this is. We are 2 months until Election Day. Gina, Jackie, Sri, they have put not just a lifetime of service that's sort of on the ballot. They put a lifetime into the past year and a half, right? Their campaigns have required every ounce of their courage, of their commitment, of their hard work, their grit and determination. And now, frankly, we're in the red zone, and it's up to you. I'm looking, there are tens of thousands of people from across the country tuned into this. And with 2 months to go, it's frankly in your hands. The baton in campaign sort of gets passed from the candidate to the voters, to the volunteers at this stage. And campaigns run on 3 foundational things. 1, ideas. We've heard the courageous sort of plans from the candidates, from Gina, Jackie, and Sri. They're putting gun safety on the ballot. And now they're depending on you to do 2 things. 1, you got to sign up for call shifts. You got to sign up for text shifts. You got to go to their websites right now. Gina, what's your website? Oh, let's get their volume on.
There we go. GinaOrtizJones.com.
All right, Jackie?
Jackie Gordon for Congress.com.
And Sri?
Sri2020.com. That's SRI2020.com.
All right. Well, I'm heading to those websites immediately after this wraps up. I'm going to make a financial contribution and look at signing up to call and text. Everybody can do that no matter where you live. They need you. 2 months to go. We know what we have to do because at the end of the day, I look at Gabby Giffords right now on my computer screen, and in some really dark and tumultuous times for this country, everybody's scared. You're right to be scared, but you can also have hope. You can be part of this Serve America Giffords panel and come away from this with a lot of hope, because if we elect Gina, Jackie, and Sri, if we then win 4 other races across the country to take back the White House, to take back control of the Senate, that doesn't just put an end to a tragic page in America's history. It does something real for people. It puts Gabby and Seth and the 3 of you into the Rose Garden, the newly designed Rose Garden of the White House, sitting next to President Joe Biden signing universal background checks into law, among other important gun safety measures, which will feel great because we fought so hard for it, but it will be more important because it will literally save thousands of people's lives. So I want everybody to sit with the gravity of that for just a second. The stakes are incredibly high on guns and so many issues. I want to thank Congressman Moulton for his leadership. Serve America is an amazing organization. Giffords is so honored and proud to get to partner with you. Gina, Jackie, Sri, we're so proud to support you. We're getting y'all. We're on the team. We're gonna help you get across the finish line. And Gabby, as always, it is such an honor to join you to bring your message of hope, bravery, grit, resilience, determination, and every other adjective in the books to the American people to support these wonderful candidates. Thank you all very much. 2 months to go.